There we go. Hey, welcome to the Energy Question with David Blackman. I am your host, David Blackman, and I am in a celebratory mood today after the reversal of the Loper Bright v. Raimondo decision by the Supreme Court last Friday and its reversal of the Chevron deference, which is the judicial doctrine that's done so much damage to our country by enabling the exponential growth of the regulatory administrative state. With me today is Meghan Lapp, our friend who we've talked with twice before on the show. She's the liaison for SeaFreeze Limited, which is one of the commercial fisheries that was involved in the Loper-Bright case. Meghan, have you stopped celebrating since Friday yet?
No. No. I'm currently very slowly reading the decision, kind of inwardly gloating the entire time. And actually, I have to say, the Supreme Court, our attorneys did such a fantastic job. The Supreme Court is quoting so many of the arguments that we made in our brief. I'm like, yes, way to go. Yeah.
I mean, what was it like when y'all saw the decision come down? I know I almost fell off my chair Friday morning when I saw it come down.
When we were in the court in January, when I was listening to the oral arguments, and I'm reading between the lines, obviously, some people that would have supported full overturn, and then others, it was kind of hard to read them, but listening to the questioning and stuff, I was like, I think we win 6-3. And then in the interim, you kind of second guess yourself and you're like, well, are they only going to sort of, refine it? Are they going to fully overturn it? And when I found out, David, I was on standby on Fox News. We were waiting every day for the decision, and I was on standby. And so before I went live, I only found out about 2 minutes before I went live on national television. I'm on the phone with the attorneys. They were like, we'll give you time to talk with the attorneys. So I'm like, guys, what happened? And they're skimming through it. And we were like, we totally won. We totally overturned it. And it was just unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, it's really more than I expected too. I figured, John Roberts and a couple of the others would come up with some weaselly language that kind of softened the blow from the rescission of the Chevron deference. But I mean, it's a full reversal of it. And that has, I assume your clients, obviously the issue in the case, which was this ridiculous NMFS regulation that required the companies to pay the cost of having regulators on their boats, including their salaries and travel expenses, just ludicrous, authoritarian kind of crap. But I know the lawyers for you guys were fully aware of the potential implications of the reversal of the Chevron deference.
Yeah, New Civil Liberties Alliance, who are our attorneys, fantastic team. They were definitely aware. They saw this case as being just textbook classic government overreach, and probably were aware that the government would invoke Chevron for that reason. You know what I mean? It's like their only defense. So although I will say what was very funny to me was that at oral arguments, Justice Gorsuch was grilling the government attorney. And, he was just fantastic. It was like watching a professor school a student. And he's like, well, define ambiguous, because ambiguous means something different to different people. And kind of, how do you define that? And her answer was like, well, we don't think this statute is ambiguous. And he was like, well, then why are we here? And I think, that just underscored, Chevron was not workable. It was not a workable standard. Yeah. They kept trying to redefine it and scale it back and develop more legal gymnastics to go through over time. And it was like, look, it's just not legal. It doesn't square with the APA. They didn't get into the constitutional arguments. It doesn't square with those either. They kind of alluded to it a little bit. And they were just like, it's unworkable. It's bad law, and we're overturning it. And I'm so relieved that they did that. It's so much cleaner. It gives courts direction. It's like, hey, just interpret the law. That's your job, literally. You're a
Yeah.
judge. Like, that's what you do.
So, I mean, I understand, of course, the potential ramifications for this for the energy business, and the Biden climate agenda and its energy policy agenda is now, all in jeopardy because of this. But as a practical matter, for the commercial fisheries, what is the immediate impact of this, and going forward, what are the differences it's going to make in their ability to get their business done?
Well, the first immediate impact is that the lower court's decision was vacated and the Supreme Court remanded it to the lower court. So we are going to go back to the lower court and relitigate, the fisheries specific issue without Chevron in play.
Okay.
So that will be the first step, and we're going to see how that goes. But I think, kind of more widely speaking, it will be similar. The implications will probably be similar to the impacts on other agencies. Now when National Marine Fisheries Service or any other government agency that rules and governs your everyday life and everything that you do, they are going to have to think twice about what types of regulations they throw out there, because they don't have Chevron to fall back on. They are going to have to actually justify their actions based on the law. And I think that is going to be difficult, in certain cases, and especially for certain agencies. And as you said, a lot of people in agencies over time have just become activists. They're federal government employees, but they're not just like, objectively applying the law or objectively carrying out their duties.
Yeah.
There are people in government agencies, they're activists, and they used Chevron as basically a shield for their agency activism. And I think you're going to see that, really, really get cut back quite a bit, because they're not going to be able to defend it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of endemic throughout this administration. I know the EPA in particular has been loaded up by this president with refugees from the NRDC and Sierra Club and some of these other activist groups. Obama did the same thing with his political appointees to that agency and to the Department of Interior and all of its bureaus and agencies as well. It's just, these folks are ideologues who have abused the Chevron deference. Gosh, in so many ways. I mean, the Endangered Species Act is really one of the worst areas where it's been used to force the Fish and Wildlife Service to list species that exist in the hundreds of millions all over the place as somehow endangered due to diminishing habitat. And so that's going to be in jeopardy. The Massachusetts v. EPA decision that enabled the EPA to regulate carbon dioxide, plant food, as a pollutant is going to be in jeopardy eventually. So it's, like your clients, it's going to take a while for it all to work its way up through the courts. And it's going to take years, but the implications of this decision, it's really hard to overstate it. And I'm so proud. I just told my wife the other day, I'm just so proud to know you, that someone directly involved in that case, and to be able to talk with you on a regular basis. It's really, really quite an honor, and I hope my viewers appreciate it as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
We've got a question, speaking of our viewers, about the great looking sword behind you. and I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that sword and who made it and what it's made of.
Yeah, so I was just talking to David before we came on air about that. That is a swordfish sword. The sword part is made out of a swordfish bill, and the handle I built in my buddy's garage one winter and epoxied it together. So I'm making weapons out of fish parts in my friends' garages.
But no federal regulations were violated in obtaining the fish bill.
No. Legally
we got to be
harvested.
sure and yeah, we have to add that disclaimer. Let's see. Mark Althwaite has a question. Will this decision lead to an aggressive revision of ESG-based regulations by major corporations and trade groups? Well, I don't know the answer to that. Meghan, do you have a
I think,
Anything?
it would really depend on, if there is no authorizing legislation that specifically, allows an agency to do that, then probably.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, as I have started to really kind of ponder on the wider implications of this decision, I've thought of two things. Um, people that are, freaking out about the decision, right? I'm like, all we're doing is returning agency regulation and agency action to the rule of law. Why
Right.
would you be opposed to that, right? Because agencies are only supposed to have the authority that is conferred upon them by Congress to do particular things. And so if keeping an agency within the scope of its legislatively delegated authority is a problem for you, then, like, do you support tyranny? Like,
Right.
kind of,
Where's
all
all
we're
that
doing is
talk about preserving
law.
democracy that we hear
Right.
from the same people all the time, right?
Right. All you're trying to do is keep agency action within the scope of the law. So, whatever the scope of the law is, whatever the law says that they can do, this is what they can do. No more, no
Right.
less. That's what they can do. And the other thing that I really can't believe, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, how is this allowed for 40 years in the United States of America, where a citizen had less rights in a court than the US government? How was
Yeah.
that allowed? That like, I actually can't believe that. I'm like, for 40 years, the US federal government defended the idea that the government has more rights than the citizen in a
Yeah.
court? Like, what?
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to me,
It
really.
is mind-boggling, and it goes back to that 1984 decision, at that time. And so I'm a lot older than you, and I remember all this. So uh, at that time, during the Reagan years, you had this problem with the courts having gotten too much power and legislating from the bench constantly over the desires and wishes of both Congress and the executive branch, right? And so this decision on Chevron deference was put into place in order to rein in the courts a little bit. And of course, the regulators, after Congress became hopelessly divided, it's been especially bad the last 20 years since Congress really ceded its ability to exercise oversight over these regulatory agencies because
Mhm.
Congress no longer does budget bills. So they don't have any real oversight over these agencies. So they've been out of control since about 20 years ago when Congress decided to stop doing budget bills. And so it's all just, and of course, this decision now, 20 years from now, we may be thinking, well, that one went too far too, and we need to do something else different in the legal system. It's just this constant ebb and flow of or tension between the three branches of government, and but that 84 decision was really awful for the country. We've had this exponential growth of the administrative state, and I wonder how much how many calls from media have you been getting since this? You mentioned Fox News, and I saw you on Fox News Sunday, but have you been getting a lot of interest from other media outlets as well?
Yeah, I've been on, like, Fox Business, Fox News, Real American News. I'll be on News Nation later this week. I talked to Politico, E&E News. I talked to the Epic Times. I talked to local media. I talked to, there's quite a few people. I was on a legal podcast. Lots of media inquiries. None from the outlets that are upset about it. And
Right. Yeah. Nothing from CNN or MSNBC, obviously,
no, no,
which is not
I've
surprising.
seen press releases from my senators in my state,
Yeah.
decrying the decision.
Well, of
Um,
course.
of course.
Of
But
course.
you know,
Well, that's good news too, in and of itself. Anytime those senators are upset about something, it's good for America. So I think we should celebrate that fact as well. Robert De Domenico, another viewer, says, "Thank you, Meghan, for your part in getting to this decision."
no,
Um, so so that's Loper Bright, and it's just it's just incredible. It's a great day in America. I'm still on a high from it, frankly, and everything else that's happened the last 6 days. But then we've got also this ongoing issue that you and I have talked about in the other two times we've talked on this podcast about this tension between the commercial fishermen and these big offshore wind developments that are being subsidized by the Biden administration. And since we haven't talked since January, I think it was, I wonder if you have any updates of events in that realm. Has anything really changed for the better or worse?
Well, we are also the lead plaintiff on a lawsuit against Vineyard Wind with Texas Public Policy Foundation. We are going to the Court of Appeals later on this month, July 25th. Currently, Vineyard Wind is continuing construction, on our fishing grounds. Fishermen are really upset to see, a place that, I know some folks, their family has fished there for 100 years and it's being taken away. Ørsted, which is majority owned by the Danish government. They are pile driving an area south of Rhode Island right now, another wind energy area, Revolution Wind. I get phone calls from fishermen freaking out. They're like, I made my last tow in that area. They put turbines on it. They told us that they weren't going to put turbines there, and now they are. So that construction is ongoing. I'm being told that you can feel the impacts in Newport, Rhode Island.
From the pile driving?
People can feel the pile driving.
Wow.
They're pile driving into Cox's Ledge, which is like an extremely ecologically important area where it's a breeding ground for many things, a feeding ground for many things, unique underwater features, like would never be allowed to be touched on land, but it's being, pile driven right now. They're also constructing off the coast of Virginia, another project. The Biden administration just announced their 9th approval. They approved the 9th offshore wind project. Although I think their count is wrong. I thought the last time, I thought that they just approved another one. I think it should have been 10th, but whatever. They're approving as quickly as they can, before the November elections or before January, right?
Yeah.
In doing so, I think that they are going to make a lot of mistakes because when you rush, you make mistakes. So I know that,
that's been obvious from the beginning, right? I mean, we've had all these, how many of the other projects have been canceled and then restarted and canceled again?
Right. Some of those projects, they canceled their power purchase agreements and then they renegotiated. So a lot of the projects that quote unquote died, were just renegotiated in the next round because the states gave them more money. Because they've got their climate goals. They are leasing. They announced leases for more leases in the Central Atlantic. I know that they want to identify more areas for lease. They identified areas in the Gulf of Maine. They plan to go to leasing on that. Like they are leasing and approving as quickly as they can. So we will see. I know folks are lawyering up for various lawsuits. There are various lawsuits in the pipeline up and down the coast. And, we're just going to have to see what the outcome of those lawsuits are, including ours, but it's really scary. And it's really, one night I was lying in bed. I couldn't fall asleep knowing that they were going to start pile driving Cox's Ledge the next day. I was like so upset I couldn't fall asleep, and I'm like, you don't do that. Would you industrialize the Grand Canyon? No.
Well, they might if it was a good place for windmills.
Well, I know.
We may come to that. I really and truly, I think these people are such crazy ideologues. They would be glad to destroy any habitat, any wild place to put up solar panels and windmills. This is how crazy they are. I mean, there was a time in our country when the Democratic Party cared about the actual environment, but that's all been discarded now over this frenzy over plant food in the atmosphere. And of course, the rent-seeking industries that are supposed to solve the problem. And so there's billions and billions of dollars to be made by all these grifting industries and the politicians that support them. So that's really what's driving all this. It's just disgraceful. And of course, if Donald Trump should win, all of this big wind stuff will go away offshore. pretty
Absolutely.
quickly.
He said at his Wildwood, New Jersey rally, day one executive order. That was
Yeah.
his statement. So
Yeah.
it's the only way it stops, other than the courts, other than, you know what I mean, a lawsuit being successful. But obviously lawsuits take a long time, and that
Yes, they
is
do.
not a quick process.
Yeah. But that's the problem that the Democrats have here and the Biden people have here is this basically the momentum behind this offshore wind thing was created with an executive order, which Trump will be able to and will reverse the day he takes office. And so that will all get unwound eventually. But all the damage that's being done today is irreversible. All the pile driving, the foundations being laid, all the dead whales and other marine mammals. I think we're up to 98 that have now washed ashore on New Jersey beaches alone. That the Biden administration hilariously claims have no relationship to the development of the wind developments, which is, just a bald-faced lie. And we all know it's a bald-faced lie. I know you probably can't say that, but I can. And it's just nonsense. And it's just the kind of gaslighting we get endlessly from this administration. And I'm just so thankful to the Supreme Court for putting an end to at least part of it. The judge in the case that put an injunction against Biden's LNG pause referred to the policy that LNG permitting pause as the epiphany of idiocracy, which frankly applies all across the spectrum of this administration's energy policy. What next? What's next? What are the next steps for you guys to I don't know. I mean, for these fishermen, how much of the commercial fishing business is being lost right now off the Northeast coast? I mean, do we have a good quantification of the entirety of the impact?
No. It's, I mean, really, it's thousands of square miles of fishable
Yeah.
area. You can quantify the area itself, right? Which you're losing. But the environmental impacts will exceed that. And so really getting a good handle on quantifying the environmental impacts, like in fishing, you are 100% reliant on nature. You are 100% reliant on a natural resource. You can't manufacture something. It's not, you're not in the manufacturing business. You're not in, and really the ecological impacts, you're not going to be able to quantify that immediately. You can say for sure that, you're degrading habitat, right? You are going to be changing currents. You're going to be changing hydrodynamics. We know that for a fact. You are going to be releasing electromagnetic fields into the ocean, which affects fish migration and behavior. You are going to be emitting low frequency noise, which kills squid. You are going to be, which is something that we fish for well, we used to fish for in the area that's being constructed right now, right? Like, these things, but I mean, you look at, okay, we know that it changes wind patterns. Like the ocean is, it's wind and tide, right? Wind and tide controls everything, right? Currents, whatever. And we know that major wind farms, especially big ones that are all clustered together, like what is happening off the coast of Rhode Island and Massachusetts, what is happening off of the coast of New York, New Jersey, that the impacts of that from a wind perspective, current perspective, can be felt 100 kilometers downwind of the wind farm. Yeah. So if your footprint is that big and you're going to change the entire hydrodynamics, I mean, you could be doing huge damage, and that's really scary.
Is it possible the Gulf Stream could be impacted by this?
The Gulf Stream is off of the shelf pretty much. It's off the shelf. So I think that, but now they want to put stuff off the shelf too. So,
well, of course they do.
it would be floating, and we would just have cables everywhere and floating, suspended in the water column with giant anchors and like, and I'm like, now my favorite though, David, my favorite is when they're like, we're going to do it in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah,
we're going to
have
South
another
Louisiana.
sales.
And I'm like, have you ever watched the Weather Channel? Like, ever? Like, I just, you know, I lived on the Mississippi Gulf Coast during Katrina. I know what a Category 5 looks like. Yeah. It's not good. You know, your windmill blades will be snapped off in a billion pieces and it will be a nightmare. I don't understand, you know, and then they're trying to build them even in the central Atlantic up, you know, Hurricane Alley of the East Coast. I'm like,
right.
Why? What, you know, subspecies.
Well, money. It's big money grab. And the other thing about the ones in the Gulf of Mexico is, of course, the lease sales are taking place dead in the center of the migratory bird superhighway. The billions and billions of birds, thousands of species, migratory birds, fly directly through that very area every year on their north-south migration routes. And it seems intentional. I mean, it just almost has to be intentional. And that to me is really a crime against nature to even contemplate doing that.
It is. And, you know, I hear, you know, the argument from the other side is like, well, the planet is burning up and we have to do something. I'm like, well, you don't have to do it right here. And, you know, to your point about the birds, okay, I don't know if anyone who's listening to this show has ever been to a northeast beach. Okay, you will see the areas roped off for piping plovers. There's piping plover nesting areas. They have ropes on the beach. You can't go there. There's these big areas because piping plovers, right? Because they're endangered, because people built houses all along the beach, but whatever. So they have roped it off, right? We have roped it off. I have literally seen state, you know, Department of Environmental Conservation officers, right? Green suits with a badge on them that says that they are a piping plover cop. Okay. This is real. Now, they put the Massachusetts, Rhode Island wind energy area, an area that's bigger than the state of Rhode Island. It's over 1,400 square miles. Okay. Right in their flyway. Like it shows, like there are charts of this is where the piping plovers go. And it's right through there.
Right in the middle.
And I'm like, they're an ESA listed species. Okay.
Right.
We have to do all this work and rope off areas and have piping plover, you know, state enforcement officers to protect them, the whole 9 yards. But we can put this in their flyway. And I'm like, who did the ESA consultation for that?
Yeah.
You know, like it's unbelievable to me, you know, growing up, literally my entire life seeing piping plover nesting areas roped off on beaches, but like, it's okay to put this in their flyway. But to your point, it's a policy decision. Nobody cares. But now, you know, hopefully also on the side of things like that, like legitimate environmental arguments, hopefully that, you know, in court, now the agency is going to have to defend that. Well, how do you defend that? How do you defend that?
Well, and it'll be interesting if Trump does win. It'll be interesting to see whether the agency even attempts to defend it. I'm thinking most likely in a second Trump term, the agencies won't even attempt to defend it because it's an indefensible position.
It is. It is. And I've seen other articles discussing that possibility. I think it is a possibility.
Yeah. So here's a LinkedIn user, Florida banned offshore wind, which is effective today, yes, and eliminated the term climate change from their regulations. Do we see other states doing this? Not to my knowledge. No. State of Louisiana, at least under the previous governor, was actually eager to see these offshore wind developments just because of the jobs it might create in their state. Governor Abbott is ambivalent about it. You know, our legislature in Texas doesn't meet again until next year. We may see something along those lines, I assume, but there's nothing happening yet. And with that, we are bumping up against our time here. Meghan, it's always such a pleasure talking with you. Tell people how
Likewise.
they can keep up with what you're doing and maybe even support your efforts.
Well, you can keep up following Texas Public Policy Foundation, their
Yeah,
website for our offshore wind issues.
that's a
For
great
the
group, by the
Chevron,
way. Yeah,
great group, awesome people. For Chevron updates and kind of how we move through the court system on our fisheries issues, you can look at New Civil Liberties Alliance. Also, great group, awesome people. They were our team on the Chevron case, fantastic. And as far as offshore wind, you can go to Green Oceans. They're a group in Rhode Island, got a lot of information on offshore wind issues. Protect Our Coast, New Jersey, awesome group of people, a lot of information. And actually, even Cape May, New Jersey, their county like webpage has a ton of information on offshore wind and the damage that it does. So
oh great, I
I would
need to go
encourage
out there.
folks. Yeah, this Cape May County is suing the federal government and the state government for an offshore wind farm off of there. So it's interesting to see, like a municipality doing that. Congressman Jeff Van Drew and Congressman Chris Smith, both from New Jersey, follow those guys. They are fighting the fight and doing
Yeah.
a fantastic job. Couldn't thank them more.
Well, thank you so much. I wish you well. Let's talk again here in a few months.
Sounds good, David. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you to everyone who chimed in with comments and questions, and to Stu Turley and the Sandstone Group. I'm David Blackman, signing off for now. If I can get it to work here. There we go.